This week I cover a couple topics. First, we get a glimpse at what has been haunting Noah for almost a century, a small hint at the incredible scale of the flood. Then I was able to illustrate Tubal-Cain sitting on his throne, and I reach back to the beginning of this series to give the triceratops gladiator a moment of glory. Let's start with the shipwright's vision. He's been wandering through his lonely home, and here has emerged into the central courtyard. This top-down view shows that the center of his home is dominated by a gigantic tree. With more dramatic angles like this, it's good to set yourself up for success. I plotted out all my perspective lines, even used some 3D models as a general guideline. I wanted the tree to be pushing up past the camera to get a view of the circular stone pattern. There are images circulating online of root systems that have grown through bricks, following the path of least resistance. It always looks cool, like a symbiosis between architecture and plant life. I'm always looking for ways to tell the story visually. For generations, the shipwright's family has lived with nature, observing it, learning from it, and helping to guide it. The relationship between roots and bricks is a way to demonstrate that relationship. Here, the roots were an intentional part of the design from the beginning. To underline that this tree is very much a part of this household, there are dozens of wool banners hung from its branches. When it comes to color and lighting, this whole sequence is an interesting challenge. I want to use light and color temperature to underscore how lonely his house feels. Not only because in this case he can't find his family, but for the last several decades, his house was lonely. One by one, everyone had left. It had never been quieter. So in the end, I settled on this look, where the morning light is growing sickly and pale. When it comes to reaction shots, a lot hangs on them. You're trying to say a lot through that one expression. So you may notice I did a couple quick exploration sketches. With these, I'm not concerned about proportion or anatomy. It's just the feeling of the expression. And as with anyone who draws, you know I was making these faces while drawing them. In my younger days, I didn't understand how important these were. But the more stories and comics I've read, and the more I've learned about visual storytelling in other mediums, the more I've learned that there really is no better way to sell a big moment than through a reaction shot. Without that human connection, it's hard to wrap our heads around it. And when it comes to color, whatever light the sun had to give has lost all warmth, and a shadow is rising. With the completion of this panel, that's page 1. Standing back and looking at it, I like the quick color story that's being told, starting with some warmth and comfort and getting more disquieting as things progress. But now it's time for that reaction shot to pay off. The flood has reached the Shepherd's Valley. The shipwright is small in the frame. He stands transfixed, looking out across the castle yard with the 2 wings of his house in view. Further out, the hillsides are covered in abandoned homes. They were once full of life and laughter, but they too have been quiet for decades. And finally, a colossal wave crashes into the mountains. This is an interesting story to work on, because really it's one of the oldest spoilers in human history. Many cultures have some version of this story. It will ultimately mark the end of this story. But since I don't know when I'm going to get to that, I think I would go a little crazy if I had to wait. Sequences like this will give me a chance to explore and practice this critical moment, but they'll also narratively serve as a good reminder of the stakes that the shipwright is working with. My hope is to present the flood as a destructive force in a way that's more extreme than I've ever seen presented. Ideally, even the most unhinged disaster movie would look tame by comparison. It will be more than just a lot of water. In this particular small moment, the mountain range around the Shepherd's Valley is actually providing some small amount of protection. The violence of the flood outside the valley is unimaginable, but this location, chosen by one of his forefathers centuries before, will end up being ideal. His vessel will be protected from the worst of the chaos. It won't stop the water, but it will slow it down. So there we have it, a brief snapshot of what motivates the shipwright to fight as hard as he does. Just a glimpse of the end of the world. Now, for a couple more illustrations in my short series. I am building towards something, and I'm excited to show you when it's all done. For this shot, I wanted to revisit another older design, Tubalcane, the first blacksmith. I shrunk my canvas down very small, and that helped me plot out my thumbnail in a way that I was much happier with. Tubalcane sits on his throne, administering justice under the advisement of his court witch. If you'd like to know more about his design, there's a whole video in this series dedicated to just that. As the man credited with the inception of blacksmithing, his face bears the scars to prove it, so he created a metal mask for himself, partly to cover those scars, partly to show off his incredible craftsmanship. I wanted to use this image as an opportunity to show off some of that craft. This is a tiny glimpse of his throne room. When the story reaches this point, I'll do a much deeper dive and make some more official choices. But for the purposes of this image, I'm being a bit less of a stickler. His pillars are adorned with statues that show different aspects of his craft. And in the background, there are many, many furnaces burning. The furnaces and forges of his kingdom never sleep. I like Tubal's original design, so I didn't really change much at all. Here I was just translating the old design onto this new pose. For his throne, I like the idea of iron plants and animals. Again, showing off his prowess. It would be meant to look alive while being made of metal. Like most people who live in this kingdom, his advisor will also be adorned largely in metal. She's adorned with bronze plates and jewelry. For her articulated mask, I like the idea of her appearing blind. So she has a diagonal pattern across her eyes and forehead with holes that could plausibly allow for vision, with some extra on her forehead to imply a third eye or some other sense being used. While the inking stage plays out here, I thought I'd talk about this weird time we're living in. Everything seems to be changing, and mostly in ways we can't predict. This may be the worst time to be starting a project like this in living memory, but I also think this may be the best time. In fact, I strongly suspect that future generations will look at this time and wish they could have been here. I don't think anything about it is going to be easy, but I think these times are also when the most interesting things happen. Storytelling is important. There wouldn't be multi-billion-dollar industries built around it if it wasn't. But those industries, like old trees in a forest, are creaking. Many of them are falling down. And in a forest, when that happens, light starts to reach the forest floor. That gives seeds and saplings that may have been planted for years a chance to grow. For a very long time, we've lived under what has been described as a monoculture. A very small amount of gatekeepers have been the arbiters of story for a very long time. I don't know about you, but I'm not going to stop listening to stories. They're a part of us. But these days, there are more and more people going out and telling their own, without the gatekeepers, without the institutions. While this may have been the case for a while, it seems like there's an acceleration taking place. Soon more and more sunlight will be hitting that forest floor. And to be clear, in this metaphor, sunlight is money. We're starting to see independent projects getting funding, and not just from investors, but from people. And people are finding stories that matter to them and putting their support behind those. I actually think it's exciting that the monoculture is losing its grip. We have this awesome opportunity to support the projects that mean something to us. And in doing so, we can build our own culture. It may be smaller, but it's ours. There are independent projects that I really like and that I've chosen to support, and I'm thinking of some formats where I can maybe put some extra attention on those as well. One thing that particularly excites me is that there are kinds of stories that have not been told for a very long time. And so instead of waiting for someone's approval, we get to just do it ourselves. I like classic adventure stories. The stories about the antediluvian world are fascinating, and I saw the potential in the story for what if Noah was Conan? It's the story my young self would have loved to find. If you see potential in that too, or you like what you see, you might consider using a little bit of the sunlight of your financial support land on this sapling. That is, if you want this story to be a part of the culture you curate for yourself. You can become a YouTube member, or just subscribe and keep following along. You can support me on Patreon. All members get early access to videos. Higher tier members get access to a private server, which has been growing quite a bit and has become a really cool community that's full of other people working on projects that they're passionate about. I'll leave you with this. This is a daunting time to be doing this. You may have a story or a project that you would love to see made. I can tell you I am consumed by this story. Many of you have things that you are consumed by. If you don't make them, then the only guarantee is they won't exist. Whether this project succeeds or not, I have to make it, because if I don't, it won't exist. And I think the better outcome is to have tried and failed than to have never made it at all. Here we have it, Tubalcane on his throne, listening to the whispers of his advisor. I'm really happy I went with the yellow color palette. I rarely use that, but I think it worked well here. Finally, another throwback character. In one of the early videos, back when it was still single digits, I designed a Nephilim gladiator with a triceratops theme. I really liked how he turned out, and I thought he would be the perfect character to put in this scenario. In the original drawing, he was already posed for it anyway, so it's like it was meant to be. This gladiator is triumphant. He defeated his prey and is ready to receive his praise. Because the design for this gladiator was simple, I didn't really see the need to change too much of it. That mask is such a statement that you can afford to go simple with the rest of it. In the thumbnail, he was holding a dinosaur head, but I had a different idea. I've said many times this series is based on my love of classic adventure stories. One of those stories is John Carter of Mars. And not just the first one, I mean the series, weird stuff and all. But I'm pretty sure even in the first book, John Carter encounters the great white apes of Mars, or they're at least referenced. I like the idea of taking something like a Gigantolopithecus, scaling it up to a ridiculous size, and giving it pale fur. One day, the shipwright will have a fight with giant white apes. The only way that won't happen is if I have to stop this story for some reason. It is inevitable. But until that day, I can do some early exploration in illustrations like this. One of his human servants stands behind him, carrying an assortment of snacks. In this case, eggs from a variety of different creatures. It can't all just be bowls of fruit. Now, I really did want to have this giant banner behind him, which you can see all the way from the thumbnail stage. I honestly wasn't thinking of it as an excuse to cover up most of the audience, but a win is a win, I'll take it. I tried a couple of experiments for the cheering crowd. I'm glad I tried them. They didn't really work. The principle behind it makes sense. Trying to find some procedural solution, I made human brushes that I could then paint cheering people with, but it just ended up looking too mechanical. So I went back and looked at some of the classical illustrations from the period that I love, especially the Hal Foster Sunday comic stories. And I realized what this needed was something that had more energy to it, something hand-drawn. And looking at the old reference gave me confidence to get a little looser with it. I love clean line work, I love it when I see it, and I aspire to make it. But in this case, messiness worked to my advantage. After all, I knew they would be largely obscured, and it really is more about giving the impression. Adding some dark shadows into it helped to give it a bit more volume. As usual, when it comes to color and lighting, my main priority is making sure that the key silhouettes read. So I had the light falling on the bottom of the curtain and the top of the gladiator, with everything else in shadow. With his scars, some indication of reflection, and finally the falling flower petals. There we have it. The triceratops gladiator receives his praise. Thanks for watching, everyone.